Attention entrepreneurs and business leaders. Do you want to unlock the secrets of explosive growth? Well, today's episode unveils game-changing strategies to attract top-notch partners and skyrocket your success. So get ready for insider tips that can transform your business.
Welcome to Fortify Live with your host, Ford Saeks.
Today, we're diving into the power of storytelling in business with a true innovator. Now, I'm excited to welcome Jack Monson. He's the president of Brand Journalist. You can check him out online at brandj.com. Now, Jack's not just a marketing guru. He's a master storyteller for brands, helping them revolutionize how the brands connect with their key audiences. Now, he has a leading podcast. I'm surprised he's carved out time for me because he's been doing his podcast now for 15 years, and he's got over 2 million downloads on his podcast. So whether you're in franchise or not, Jack's insights on authentic branding are really going to be of notice to everybody. So take notes. Jack, welcome to today's episode of Fortify Live.
Hey, Ford, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Well, since you've got 2 million downloads and you've been doing this for 15 years, let's start with what got you excited about franchising way back in when you first got into it, and then tell us a little bit about your company.
Yeah, I was in marketing for a few years before I even knew what franchising was. And I was working for this agency based in the New York area. And one day the owner of the agency said, we had a couple of franchise clients. And he said, I want you to go to this thing called the International Franchise Association. And my response was, that sounds awful. Why would I want to go to that? Right? That was in 2009. So I went to it and I said, I'll go, but I'm going to go one time and I'm never going back again. Well, lo and behold, I haven't missed an IFA event in about 15 years. So they pulled me right in, man. I fell in love with franchising right at that show. And the changes we've seen in marketing over the past few years have really been amplified in franchising when you apply some of those things to these fantastic franchise brands. So it's really been a really good fit for my love of marketing and now my love of franchising.
Well, I got started in franchising similarly. I founded 17 different companies. 3 went 7 figures, 1 went 8 figures. And then people started asking me, well, how did you do that? How did you grow a brand and through B2B, B2C? How did you grow it? And so then I started getting asked to speak at conferences, and I'm like, okay, this is 34 years ago. I'm like, oh, this is a business. I can get paid for it. So I became a speaker and a keynoter, and then I got invited to speak at the IFA conference, and I didn't know anything about it. I'm like, well, what's the top challenges in the franchising? Which I quickly learned was the franchisors want the franchisees to follow their systems, and the franchisees are like, hey, what have you done for me lately? How come you're not driving more business into my company? So you've got this brand, you've got this popular podcast, and you've got all this stuff you're doing. Your podcast reached 2 million downloads and even more than that now. But what did you find is the most surprising insight about franchise growth over the years? Has it's adapted? Because, franchisors, just to set the stage for those people who might be just an entrepreneur, franchisor is the brand, franchisees are who purchased the franchise system. But marketing really has changed. Branding has changed. How do you see that significantly in just the last 3 years?
Well, I think 3 years is a great place to start. Everything's changed in the past 3 years. And I tell brands all the time, if you're doing the same marketing activities and strategies that you were using 3 years ago, forget it. You've got to start over because the world's changed a couple of times since then. And I really think we may be looking at another huge change in 2025 into 2026, just with some of the economic issues we're looking at right now, and definitely with some government issues we're looking at right now for franchises. So if you're still running ads the same way you were in 2018, if you're still showing videos that have, that were made in 2020 and people are wearing masks, you might want to rethink what you're doing right now, because all of that has got to go and move on to what we're dealing with right now, which is a lot of AI-based targeting and a lot of AI-based creation and content creation. So you've got to keep up with it. And, there's a lot of people who've been in marketing for a long time who still want to do things the way they did it in 2009. and you just can't do that anymore. So we work with a lot of brands who are our internal phrase for them, we call them franchise freaks, because they're just a little different than every other brand out there, right? They're freaky for franchise.
I had to hit my button.
I didn't even know you had. Awesome. So they're a little different, and maybe they have a brand or an offering that is not for everybody, right? We're not talking about the candidates who have spent years going to expos and going to portals and searching on Google. We're talking about a whole new generation of franchise candidates who are not looking for the same franchises that their parents were looking for. So with all of that in mind, the way we reach those people and the places where those people live digitally right now is completely different than it was just a few years ago. So that's why we pride ourselves on reinventing every couple of years. One of the biggest things we do right now is personal branding videos, right? So you see these all day on Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts and LinkedIn video and definitely on TikTok. That's something that no one in franchising was even doing 2 years ago. And now that's a big chunk of our business, and it's been wildly successful for a lot of franchise brands. So that's something that we tend to stop and take a breath and say, okay, personal branding going really well right now. It didn't exist 2 years ago. What's the next thing that doesn't exist today, but will make a big difference for these brands in a couple of years? So that's what we're always looking for.
Yeah, I looked at it, when I do a lot of keynote presentations for franchise brands and multi-unit owner, multi-brand owners and things. And, what's nice about franchising is if I speak at a franchise conference, the franchisor then hires me strategically to help them, give them insights on doing it. Now, I have an agency. I don't specialize in like what you're doing. So if you're listening right now, we are live right now on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube, and promoted out on a lot of things. And the audio track for this also becomes the Business Growth Show podcast. So just so everybody knows, if you're listening, we're listening to Jack Monson. It's Monson. He's the president of Brand J, so brand journalist, brandj.com. Okay, so I always tell people that they don't own their own brand. Franchise companies and companies alike always think that they own their brand. I say that your brand is the perception in the mind of your ideal client. That's what it's owned. And marketing and sales isn't hype and manipulation. It's just giving people enough information that they can make good decisions. And now with the way the buying processes have changed, you mentioned economic, you mentioned the compliance, you mentioned the government, and now you've got the economic, and you've got, change in staffing. And then the biggest disruption is AI right now. And it's interesting because I do a webinar every month on AI, and I post a new one online. And it's so interesting that when I do a pre-event survey, I got, 400 people signed up for it. And on a scale of 1 to 10, their level of expertise is 5 and under. And I get a few 8s or 9s, but then at the end of my presentation, they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I was an 8 or 9, because they don't know what they don't know, and the disruption. And I want to go back to the personal branding thing for just a moment, because I think what you said is so important. When people ask me, where should they be active? Should they be Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, whatever? I tell them fish where the fish are, but you've got to, what I like about what you guys are doing at Brand J is telling their personal story. That's what the ideal clients want. They want to see behind the scenes. They want to see that there's a real company and there's a real brand. So I think the real takeaway here for the listeners is to shift, what shows up when someone Googles your name and what shows up when they search for your company.
Yeah. And it goes beyond even searching. I think the real success that you can have in social has nothing to do with the people who are looking for you, or even looking for your competitor, or looking for an opportunity like yours. It's the people who are spending all day doing this, right?
Right. Scrolling.
And they're looking at everything else but franchise opportunities. So you want to get in their feed somehow, right? This is a race for attention. So we've got to create something that puts you or me or our client or whomever, we've got to put those people in front of their next candidate, even though that candidate doesn't even know that they're interested in buying a franchise, right? They're not searching for that. They're just living their lives online. And suddenly they're going to see one of my clients who is now seen as a thought leader or an expert, whether it's in pizza or in financing or in real estate or franchising or whatever that person is an expert in. They're seeing that person show up and they're giving some advice. And I think that's the real difference in marketing, digital marketing in the past few years. We've shifted from how to, where people would go to YouTube or Google and find out how to do something, right? How to change a tire, right? How to start a business, how to buy a franchise. We've shifted from that to people going to places like TikTok and Reels, and they're not looking for how-to information. They're looking for advice. They're looking for advice on their life, their career, their love life, fashion and beauty, their hobbies, whatever they're interested in. That's why they go to short form videos. And it isn't something where, 10 years ago, someone would look for a video, they'd watch it, and then they're off, right? Now you're one of the 472 videos that that person's going to watch today. So what are you going to do to stand out and make your brand stand out and make your CEO or your chief development officer, whoever the star of the video is, what are you going to do to make that person stand out? So the viewer says, that guy Ford, he knows a lot of cool stuff. I might go back and watch him again. Right? Or even better, the algorithms for those platforms are going to say, John Smith out in West Des Moines, Iowa, really likes videos kind of like the ones that Ford puts out. So let's show more of those, right? That's really where we're getting to with marketing right now. So the targeting we were doing 5 years ago, out the window. It's all about the content and what you're doing to give value to that listener, that viewer, and to that platform. So they'll keep repeating your content and bringing in new content that viewer wants to see.
Yeah, one of the things on my action list, I mean, I've got so many things I'm doing, preparing for keynotes, and I have consulting clients, and I want to walk my talk because I'm always telling people the same thing. You've got to create more content. And then I look at my social media following, which is small in comparison to some brands, because I've spent my time helping everybody else get millions and even hundreds of millions of views. I've got some of the top people on YouTube. I've got the top 3 people on LinkedIn. I mean, I've got these people who I haven't created their content, but I've given them insights on how to connect with their real audience. One of the things I like right now, I mean, I spend probably an hour or two on TikTok now. No, not just watching people dance. There is some of that. There's my little button for that. I can't even find it. There we go. But what I would say is I like the micro learning because, again, I'm speaking a lot on AI. And so I have triggered enough algorithms. Now I'm getting the news and the insights on AI, and which is as it relates to business. I don't care about technology. I care about, is this going to help me expand my influence, build my list? Is this going to help me get leads? Is it going to help me get new and repeat sales? Or is it going to help me improve operational performance? And so what's really interesting now is the trend I've seen that I've started to like is where they take the beginning of one video and then they merge it into their, like someone does a somersault and then it rolls into their business. And so, some of those are really creative. And I know that it's a trend, right? And I think that when everybody zigs, you want to zag. I mean, you want to really look at ahead because those trends change so quickly. But what doesn't change is the fact that fish where the fish are, our audiences, our ideal clients are on these platforms consuming content. And just like what you said, Jack, if you can have content at the different phases of the buying process, which is phase 1 is awareness. They're not even aware that there's a company. They're just trying to be entertained. And how do you get them to interrupt? And I have a thing where I always tell all marketing is interruption marketing. At the end of the day, they're not waiting around for your message. You're going to interrupt them. And how do you stop the scroll?
Right. The only paid ads and commercial messages that we look forward to are during the Super Bowl, right? So one day a year that works, but the other 364, you've got to get in their face somehow when they really aren't looking for that. So you mentioned something about brand awareness, Ford, and I want to hit this point pretty hard, especially with the paid advertising we do on Facebook and Instagram, LinkedIn, Google, other places. I like to start, it's kind of overly simple, but I like to start with every client campaign with the question, is this brand awareness or is it lead generation? Because I think one of the issues that marketers in franchise development have really hit over the past few years is we're all in love with lead generation, right? I put in $5,000, I get X number of leads, right? I put in $10,000, I get X number of clicks. And that way I can forecast exactly how much I'm going to sell for the next 5 years. And isn't that great? So that's terrific, but it doesn't always work that way. Not every message that you want to hit a candidate with can be lead generation, right?
I agree.
You've got to make sure they know who you are, and what your opportunity is. We've got to put all of our messages and our ads into a couple of buckets, branding or lead gen. So some brands, let's say your Little Caesars or Domino's or Pizza Hut, probably don't have to spend as much time on brand awareness, even in franchise development. Most candidates know who those entities are. But if we're starting, Ford and Jack's Pizza Company,
Right.
we're going to have to educate people what this is all about. That it isn't just pizza that we're trying to sell. There's a business opportunity here. We've got to get that message out for quite a while before we can expect leads to start coming in after people click on it. So really two different buckets when you're starting a process like this, branding and lead generation. I would also say a couple of other things that we're doing differently now is, I won't say we're going away from personas, because that's a big part of marketing, knowing who that candidate is. Who's your perfect franchisee, right? What type of person will be a really successful franchisee in your system? But we're peeling away from those sort of tired ideas of personas, like, it's entrepreneur Ellie or tool time Tim or whatever
Right.
persona people have built over the years. Those are nice. That's a good place to start. But I think so much of franchising is people who don't really fit that persona, but they're in the right place at the right time, right? They just left the military, or they just got laid off from, you name the company that's doing layoffs this year.
Yeah, everyone.
Or they've decided I've had enough of my state and I'm moving to Texas or Florida, right? So we want to hit those people when the circumstances are right, even though they might not ever fit that persona in their entire lives. So we want to make sure that we're not just targeting people who we think would be perfect. We want to have content out there that gets in front of those people who a year ago they might not have been a good candidate for
You
you.
want to be top of mind.
2 years from now, it might be a terrible candidate for you. But right now, in the fall of 2024, something's going on in their world that is going to make them say, tell me more about this opportunity. And I think that's what we're trying to get to at the end of the day, is getting people to say, tell me more about this opportunity.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I always, whenever I'm writing sales copy or working with a brand, I always tell them, there's different phases. You've got the awareness phase, the research, comparison, shopping, and buying. You need to have a broad sense of content, because, people come to me and they'll tell me, just like Jack, when they come to your agency, they want to tell you that they know exactly who their market is, but that's because of what they've done in the past. That doesn't mean that's who their best customer is. It's just like when a company comes to me and they go, well, let me tell you, Ford, I built my business on referrals, and they're so proud. And I'm like, you know what? Great. Good for you. I'm glad you built it on referrals. I was going to cuss, but I thought I'd put my button instead. But the reason you build your business on referrals is because all your other marketing sucks, right? Your footprint's no good, your content's no good, your brand's outdated. Like, I'm proud of you, and referrals are one of the shortest ways to shorten the cycle on getting a customer, right? Lowest cost to acquire a customer. But that doesn't mean that that's right. And I think that having a broad approach, I always, when I work with brands, to tell them, look, you have to have content for the influencers and for the purchasers, right? And anybody who's ever been in a relationship or a significant other, someone's the influencer and someone's the purchaser. And then if you target your content too tight, then you do miss out on those opportunities. So I think it's really smart. It's just like even when you do pay-per-click ads, right? We start really broad. We try to figure out where we're getting traffic, and then Are we getting conversions? And then we'll tighten it up from there. But I agree with your concept. I think a lot of brands get it wrong because they're still thinking the way, again, 3 years. I mentioned 3 years. We didn't talk in the green room about what questions we were going to cover today.
No,
I know you had a huge depth of knowledge, but I think everything changed about 3 years ago. And like you said, going forward, I think it's going to change. So based on that, in your experience, what do you think the biggest misconception is that businesses have about attracting top-notch partners, and how does storytelling address it? Because there's a lot of buzzword. I mean, there's a popular book by Donald Miller on story brand, and I read that book and I'm like, son of a, I should have written the book. I mean, it was basically marketing 101. Anybody who's been in marketing could have written that book. Nothing against Don Miller. I think it's a great book. But tell me your perspective on the biggest misconception that brands have. How do they attract partners? And then what does storytelling fit into it?
Yeah, I think we'll start with where people get storytelling wrong. I see a lot of brands who think storytelling is their origin story, right?
Right.
How did you become Iron Man, or
Right.
how did you become Captain America, right? Okay, you've got to tell that story at some point, maybe in the first couple of minutes of the conversation. But the reality is, so many candidates just don't care, and you're not going to attract
You
their
said that really
attention.
politely too. Whoops, wrong button. Hit the wrong button. I was trying to hit a sound effect. Go ahead.
There we go. They just don't care about your origin story. You know, I hear far too many podcasts and see far too many YouTube videos with a founder where they talk for 20 minutes about, well, we developed the secret formula for our pizza sauce in my dorm room in 1986, or my grandfather brought the recipe over, you know, from Italy in 1946 or something like that. And it's like, that's a fun, cute story to have somewhere or to talk about for 15 seconds. But you've got to talk about what's in it for the franchisee. That's all anyone
Right.
really cares about, right? So a little bit of flavor on your brand, and a little bit, especially if it's a legacy brand and you've got some fun history, that's fine. But you've got to get from the origin story to the opportunity as fast as possible. So I think that's probably the biggest misconception about storytelling, is people think it's a resume. You know, well,
Right.
I went to this college and then I started working for Microsoft and then I left that job and started this company. Again, no one cares. You've got to talk about the opportunity. You've got to talk about what's in it for the franchisee. And another misconception about that, beyond storytelling, is I think we've all been in franchising long enough to just jump right to the numbers, right? Well, how much money am I going to make?
Right.
And that's kind of how we've developed, you know, our pitches. But I think the reality is, and this is where storytelling can help, franchisees care about how much money they're going to make, but what they really want to know is, what am I going to do all day, right? Do I have to make the pizzas, or am I hiring people to make the pizzas? Do I have to be in the pizza shop, or am I going to be out at the Rotary Club or at events in the community? Do I have to clean the place, or do I hire somebody to clean the place, right? What's it look like if I decide to get 2 pizza shops? You know, so I think telling the franchisee's story is what your potential franchisees want to see. They want to see videos or hear podcasts about what that franchisee does all day. So we do a lot of video work. We do some great storytelling. Our head of video is a guy named Dan Wiley, who's just this brilliant mini documentary maker. And the stories we tell are really about what the franchisees do all day. So we follow them around and show a
Right.
franchisee who's, you know, getting up early and working out, and then maybe taking her daughter to school, and then meeting with the team, and then going to some meetings, and then spending some time in the studio or the shop or whatever the franchise is, and then maybe going back to coach, you know, a basketball team in the evenings or something like that. And then, you know, at the end of the day, dinner with the family. That's the kind of story that we want to tell, along with, you know, how that person got to that point. But I want potential candidates to see that franchisee and say, you know what, I'm a lot like her. I could do this, and that looks like the kind of life that I want to build. So to me, that's a much better story than the origin story of how the founder came up with a concept.
Yeah, and I hope our listeners and viewers are really paying attention to that, because it relates to, one of the hardest things that companies have in all businesses now is, how do you find, attract, engage, and retain top talent for your company, right? Whether it's your brand, my brand, or a franchise, or any business, right? B2B or B2C. And when you think about why people do something, so I'm strategically on some nonprofit boards, and nonprofits, if they're going to have a conference, it's two things: there's education and there's community, right? So they need to show that there's both. In a business like a franchise, someone wants to be able to eavesdrop and see what it's going to look like. If they're an employee and they're thinking about coming to work for a company, they want to see what the culture of the company, what the leadership's like, what is their day going to be like. So it's the same application of telling that eavesdropper story that helps answers those hidden questions that we all know that those prospects have. And with the micro attention spans that everybody has right now, video is one of the best formats to do it. I mean, I'm doing a lot with video now too, and I always have. I think it's easier for me to sit down and do an hour video than to go write a 600-word blog post, right? I can go for hours.
I'm the same way, man. I say this all the time. I do write some monthly and quarterly articles for a few of the trade publications, and to write a 600-word article, it takes me 2 weeks. But to do 5 20-minute podcasts, that's real time. Turn the microphone on and let's talk, right? So I think we've found our medium, and I think getting some of our clients and some of the brands that maybe are still back in the idea of it's all written content or it's all paid ads or something like that, getting them involved in something like short form video or even longer form video, like we're doing here today.
Right.
There's a lot of people who are thriving in that environment. I've seen it with some of our clients where one of our clients is a CEO who's been in the industry for several years. We were at the IFA convention in Phoenix this past February, and as he was standing there in the exhibit hall, somebody came up to him and said, hey, I saw you on TikTok. And it's like, in a million years, this guy never thought anyone was going to say those words, right? But he's terrific on TikTok.
Right.
He's giving out really good advice for people in the franchise space. And obviously it resonated with this person who just saw him and walked up and said, I saw you on TikTok.
Well, it also personalizes the brand. I think it's really important to that access, to having them feel like there's access, and those brands that are not engaging in storytelling, in branding, and also with the technology. I think that one of the things I'm curious on your thoughts on AI is, I think where a lot of brands are rushing to try to replace humans with AI, especially with the regulations and the minimum wages and all the stuff that are going on in franchising and the work contracts, and is it an employee or is it a independent? And I think that while everybody goes high tech, high touch is going to become even more important. And those videos, well, one, it's going to be harder to tell what's real and what's not real because AI, and videos can be faked now pretty damn good. But I think that it's still important to make sure that brands understand that how are their franchisees telling their story to the new employee, how are their employees talking about their brand when they're out marketing and selling, because it's not just the company, it's anybody who involved in the company is involved in marketing.
Yeah, I do see a big backlash coming with too much AI. Maybe not too much AI in the wrong places, right?
Yes.
I love AI for curating content. I hate AI for creating content, right? So one of the things that we do at Brand J is all of the videos we make, all of the podcasts we produce, all of the voiceovers we do on ads, we tell people this is not AI. We use real live human beings, especially if the CEO from the brand is involved. We want that person, not the AI version of that person.
100%.
Right. And I also think, and I see it unfortunately, I see it on LinkedIn more than anywhere. And you and I are both on LinkedIn a lot. We see a lot of LinkedIn posts every day. And the number of posts that I've seen in the past year and a half that are obviously written by AI poorly, right? And I look at that and I think, if I know the difference, then someone who actually knows that person better than me, they're really going to know that this is AI, you know. And instantly I think, oh, that person just has someone writing some AI copy for him, and someone posted on LinkedIn for him. I think getting back to having real live people writing that stuff and creating the content and doing any of the creative part, that's great. If they need AI as a tool to help them do something, terrific. Maybe help them research, maybe help them get the words right. But I think we're going to hit a point, and who knows what the social channels will do someday. I'm terrified of the day where, well, actually not terrified, I would kind of welcome it, where Google says, this was written by AI and it's not our AI. So guess what? We're going to drown it. And I think that day could come. So I'm thrilled that we're writing real content. We're creating real videos with real people, doing real podcasts with real voices. So I think if that day does come, and the channels start throttling down AI stuff, our stuff will still do really well. So we'll see if that happens. But I would be careful about doing only AI generated content.
Yeah, I
Because
think that day's
some,
already here. I think I think all boats rise with the tide. Well, right now, any
yeah,
of us can create loads of content and we're on expertise. So being an expert is a commodity anymore because AI is 500% smarter than the smartest human. So right now you've got people creating all their content for social media or whatever their branding is on it using AI tools. Well, the search engines are all AI driven to rank that content. I think within 3 to 6 months, the term of search engine optimization, it's gone because you can't, everything's going to be a commodity. All boats are going to rise with the tide, and it's going to make those personal, those authenticated situations be so much more. Because again, I think the search engines are going to completely change. I don't think it's going to be a search engine anymore. I certainly don't believe SEO. Now, I have no proof for this. I want to be very transparent. I'm not backing this up with any research data, but being an entrepreneur for my whole life, for 5 decades, I've got some insights here, and I just think that it's a short-term thought to think, oh, I'm going to go make a 900-word blog post and I'm going to SEO optimize it. And okay, great. But that's really short-term thinking. I think that a lot of jobs are going to be replaced. I think the buying process is going to change. I think that my wife is in health and fitness. She's not in a franchise, but she's in health and fitness. And I keep telling her that people are going to want to do a disconnected retreat where you can have people, let's go to Hawaii or go to some exotic place and invite people to have no technology for 4 days. And I guarantee you'll sell it out because people are going to want to get away from all the noise. I mean, I don't spend any time on Facebook. My main market, of course, I'm looking for opportunities to speak and add value. So LinkedIn and YouTube is where I spend most of my time. I'm active on Facebook when my team posts stuff, but it's not great. It's repurposing episodes that I've done, or they're calling me and I say, hey, send me 3 posts and I'll send them the posts. But I'm not active there.
Especially if it's not paid, it's probably not reaching.
No, it's not. It's not reaching anybody. And that's the whole point is you have to pay to play, and I'm not going to boost those types of posts. And I want to fish where my fish are. And so for me, one of my best marketing tools is this podcast, because I can call up. I've been amazed at how many CEOs I can call up and go, I'd like to tell your story and they're like, I mean, I might have a couple hundred listeners, right? I don't have 2 million downloads like you do, but I've had, my good friend Scott Greenberg and a few other people that are in franchising on my show, but I've got a lot of CEOs because they'll carve out 30 minutes to share their episode, and then they use the episode to promote their brand or to use in their marketing. So it's been a good tool for me, but it makes more sense for me to do an episode with someone like you that got a big following, or someone in franchising. In next week, I'm actually gonna have Matt Haller, from IFA on and I've been trying to get him on for a long time, and I finally got him to say, okay, I'll be on the show. So to me, it's all about that positioning, right? Because brands, I mean, my keynote fee is $25,000. There's a lot of clients that speakers' fees are a lot higher than mine, but for franchising, unless you're a celebrity, that's about the top. I mean, if you're a celebrity like Shaq or somebody, okay, you're going to get 100 grand, or maybe Gary Vee, but not me. So I have to look for brands that have over 100 locations, because then they usually have conferences. Although I did an event in Cancun for a company called Frenchies that had 25 franchise units. They paid my full fee, and I'm like, okay, this is pretty good deal. And that was Guy Coffee. He was actually on my show also. But the point is, fish where the fish are. So if you're listening to this, yes, use AI tools, but keep in mind that, it's like Wayne Gretzky. I don't want to go where the puck is. I'm looking at where it's going to be. And I really think that expert generated content that isn't authentic, it's just not even going to get anything. It's just like pay to play right now on all the social media channels.
Yeah. We're going to get to the point where people are creating what I call fake podcasts using AI with a fake voice. And on the other end, it's going to be listened to by someone else's AI program, right? So we're not engaging anymore. It's like, your people call my people. Well, now it's your AI people engage with my AI people.
Well, it's just like I use a Plod device. I don't know. I use a little Plod device that sticks on the back of my phone. Mainly I got it because if someone calls my speaking company, I could never record the phone. I can't push a button. So now I can record with permission, calls from prospects. And then what I like is it summarizes everything for me. And so I use AI as that tool, but not as a replacement. Yeah. Right. And so
curate.
It curates the content. And so what I like is it'll help me do show notes for this episode. It'll help me, if I'm on a pre-event call, what are the key factors? Who's going to do what by when? It's a tool, but it's not a replacement. So looking forward as we get ready to wrap up, any closing thoughts that you want to leave our listeners with, and then stick around after I play the outro.
Yeah. I would say we've talked a lot about video, and that's obviously where the majority of our work is. And so many marketers are spending most of their time in video right now. I would say, don't sleep on audio podcasts, right? They are not going away. They're not done. They're not finished. Not everything has to be a video. The majority of the podcasts I produce are audio, especially when it's a specific business opportunity or a specific business topic. I find and maybe it's a franchise thing, maybe it's a thing with entrepreneurs, but we're typically reaching very busy, active people. Right. And people are listening to your audio podcast or mine or our clients while they're working out, they're commuting, they're traveling, they're in the airport, they're on a train, they're picking their kids up, dropping their kids off, whatever. That's when they're listening to business related podcasts like the two of us do. The majority of the entrepreneurs that we're speaking to are not people who are going to binge watch Netflix for 10 hours a day, right? That's not who is interested in the business opportunities that we're discussing. So I think, great, do a lot of video, but also have that audio component, because there's a certain sector of that audience that loves audio. They're on the move and they want to listen while they're doing two other things. So audio podcasting, still growing, not going away.
Yeah, 100%. So I do this show Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Central on all the popular platforms. I produce the show using StreamYard. So I broadcast live to multiple places through StreamYard. StreamYard helps me publish it on all the major platforms ahead of time. And then I give the guest, teaser copy and graphics to promote it. And then the audio, I just parse the audio out. And then I produce the podcast with it, run it through some AI tools to help clean up the ums and ahs. And I cut out some of that out for the podcast so it's more concise. And then upload it to Libsyn. And then Libsyn sends it out to Spotify and Apple Music and all those different things. So it's one piece of content repurposed. And so I like the video because I like to have the visuals. And for me, it's social proof, right? It's just like when I went to your site, because Scott and I compete for a lot of work. I'm like, well, Scott's on Brand J's website. How do I get on? So I told Devin, get a hold of them and get him on my show. And if there's an opportunity. So if you need a guest for anything you're doing, I certainly have a depth of knowledge in this field. Love to be his guest. But the point was, I didn't know you. I knew of IFA through IFA. I saw the podcast, saw what you were doing. with Social Geeks and all the other things you're doing. And I'm thinking, wow, how can I build that relationship? And that's the same thing that brands can do. They can reach out to their core distributors, their vendors. They can share insights of value. And I think that's really the key is context is everything. What problems you solve that people will pay to make go away? What type of information do you have? It's never too long. It's only too boring. I think I'll close with that and let you have the last word. But, people say, well, how long should it be? It's never too long. It's just too boring. But I do appreciate you being here. Any closing thoughts? And then we'll wrap the show up.
Now, keep it concise. You're competing for attention, like we said earlier. And yeah, if you have something that someone will listen to for 2 hours, go for it. That's great. But for the majority of the stuff, keep it short, pull them in, make sure they come back again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Fortify Live. Make sure to like, comment, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. And don't forget to subscribe to the Business Growth Show podcast, available wherever you get your podcast streaming fix. We air weekly at 11 a.m. Central Time. So until next week, keep pushing the boundaries and never stop growing.